forts to the south that protected Liège, as well as the southern bridges across the Meuse River. The final two casemates on top of the fortress were Mi-Nord and Mi-Sud. They got their names from the fact they were armed only with mitrailleuses or machine guns. Their purpose was to protect the other gun emplacements from infantry attack in what was thought to be the unlikely event that attacking troops managed to get on top of the fortress. In addition, there were two blockhouses, Canal Sud and Canal Nord, on the banks of the Albert Canal. These two emplacements dominated any approach by boat or foot along the canal for hundreds of yards. To the north and south of Fort Eben Emael were a series of observation posts that provided the guns with target information via telephone and radio. There were also three false emplacements made of thin steel sheeting to represent armored cupolas, in order to deceive an enemy and make the fortress appear even stronger than it was. All these gun emplacements were served by miles of underground tunnels on two levels, the intermediate and lower. At the intermediate level, about 60 feet below the surface, was a maze of galleries that served the actual gun emplacements. Each one incorporated an ammunition bunker, with a system of electric elevators providing a constant supply of ammunition to the guns. Each gun emplacement was served by a gun crew of 16 to 30 men, depending on the type and number of weapons. The guns were laid on their targets by a simple combination of traverse and elevation. Every target in the surrounding area was accurately plotted, so it would take only a phone call to relay the identified target. This would be immediately engaged by the guns without the crews even having to look outside. If a gun emplacement was captured by the enemy, the complete installation could be sealed off from the interior of the fort by a series of armored doors. These were arranged in twin pairs, with the space in between the doors being filled in an emergency by 8-inch steel beams and sandbags. Once barred and locked, these armored doors could withstand attack from the heaviest of conventional explosives. The lower level of the fortress was about 120 feet below the plateau surface. The miles of tunnels on this level housed the administrative and accommodation areas, incorporating showers, mess halls, and sleeping quarters. All these facilities were at the same level as the ground outside and the main entrance at Block 1, through which passed all the supplies for the fortress. One of the most important of these was ammunition. Much of this was stored on the lower level and was moved to the intermediate level by means of handcarts, through armored doors, and upwards by elevators. There was constant traffic of supplies and personnel through the 5 miles of tunnels inside the fortress. The fort had a garrison of about 1,200 men, many of whom were stationed in the village of Wonk, 4 miles away. They were under the command of Major Jean Jautrand, an experienced regular officer. In all, there were 16 gun emplacements at Fort Eben Emael. However, the guns could only fire at the express command of the Belgian units that were stationed in the surrounding areas, and only at targets specified by them. The fortress commander did not have the authority to fire his guns without permission. In the heat of battle, this complicated chain of command was to have dire consequences. Furthermore, the guns were forbidden to fire on any targets in neighboring neutral Holland. Nevertheless, Fort Eben Emael gained the reputation as the strongest fortress in the world, and many deemed it to be impregnable. It would take a very powerful enemy indeed to overcome its formidable defenses. In 1939, Hitler sought to right what he saw were the injustices of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, signed at the end of World War I between Germany and the Allies. The Germans bitterly resented the reparation payments and the huge territorial losses imposed on her by the treaty. Hitler promised to overturn it and secure additional Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people, who he contended deserved more as members of a superior race. On September 1, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland and started a Second World War with Britain and France. To outflank France's formidable Maginot Line, the German offensive once again had to be mounted through Belgium. To do that, Hitler had overcome Belgium's strongest fortress, Fort Eben Emael. On October 27, 1939, he summoned General Kurt Student to the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. Student was the commander of the Luftwaffe's 7th Flieger Division, the world's first operational airborne division. He was a great advocate of airborne warfare and was one of the first officers to investigate the military applications of gliders. By 1939, the Luftwaffe had a highly effective glider, the DFS-230, which was capable of carrying 8 troops, a pilot, and several hundred pounds of ammunition. It was towed by a peculiar-looking 3-engined aircraft that had been developed as a passenger plane for Germany's commercial airline, Lufthansa, during the 1930s. By 1939, the Ju-52 had become the standard transport plane in the Luftwaffe. Once released by the Ju-52, the glider could fly 12 miles and make an accurate pinpoint landing. Hitler demanded to know whether the glider could land on top of Fort Eben Emael, and if so, in what numbers. Student figured it was possible for up to a dozen gliders to land in the specified area, but only in daylight, or at worst, in twilight. But Student remained skeptical as to what 100 lightly armed paratroopers could achieve against gun emplacements that were impregnable against the heaviest of bombs and artillery shells of the day. It was then that Hitler revealed the existence of a new German secret explosive, the Halungdenwaffen, or hollow charge weapons. The principle of the hollow charge was originally discovered by American Charles Monroe in the 1880s. By shaping conventional explosives around a copper cone, the detonation created a high-pressure jet of molten metal that could penetrate thick steel. By 1939, the Germans had developed a massive hollow charge weapon powerful enough to penetrate the heavy armored defenses of Fort Eben Emael. Hitler ordered General Student to capture Fort Eben Emael and the bridges over the Albert Canal. Student selected the men for the task from the 7th Flieger Division. Under the command of Captain Walter Koch, an assault force of paratroopers and gliders was activated on November 2, 1939, at Hildesheim in northern Germany. It was known as Sturmabteilung Koch, but for security reasons it was given a succession of code names. In all, it comprised almost 500 men, including glider pilots. For the capture of Fort Eben Emael itself, a detachment of combat engineers was selected from the Pioneer Company within the 7th Flieger Division. Under the command of Lieutenant Rudolf Witzig, this numbered 90 men, most of whom were veterans of previous campaigns. Sturmabteilung Koch was divided into 4 assault groups.